flying over the Black Sea was quiet until it wasn't. At 9:41 hours, November 3rd, 2025, the comm inside a U.S. Air Force B-1 B Lancer vanished in an instant. A sharp mechanical alarm erupted through the cockpit, and the radar warning receiver lit up with a barrage of threat indicators. Inside the aircraft, red light pulsed across every surface as the crew absorbed the message no pilot ever wants to hear. Someone had a radar lock on them. "Spike, spike, spike," came the call through the headset. Multiple bandits inbound high-speed closure. The data pouring across the multifunction displays painted an unmistakable picture. Something fast and aggressive was coming straight at them. The B-1, call sign Viking 07, was 68 nautical miles south of Crimea, well within international airspace, when the impossible appeared on their screens. 2 Russian Su-35 Flanker E interceptors had achieved radar lock. Major Elena Voss, pilot in command, had flown this bomber for 8 years. She'd trained for countless hostile intercept scenarios, but never seen one unfold in real time. The B-1B, a supersonic, variable geometry strategic bomber built to deliver precision strikes anywhere on Earth, was now a target. Her co-pilot scanned his instruments. Eyes wide, they're coming right at us. At 9:44 hours, the encrypted comms link crackled alive. NATO's airborne early warning system, a U.S. Air Force E-3 AWACS orbiting near Romanian airspace, transmitted a priority message. Multiple fast movers, origin Russian airbase, tracking east-south trajectory, vectoring toward Viking 07. The words left no room for doubt. The Russians were airborne, transponders off, and closing fast. Radar analysts at the AWACS confirmed the launch from Belbek Air Base in occupied Crimea. 2 Su-35s had scrambled, descending from 35,000 feet and accelerating past Mach 1.5. They'd flashed briefly on Allied radar networks before vanishing into the electromagnetic clutter. Every signal pointed to one conclusion: the Russian pilots were hunting. Inside the Lancer, Major Voss switched to the secure NATO frequency. AWACS, confirm intercept. Viking 07 continuing on flight path. Bravo 3, no deviation. Her tone was calm. Procedural NATO flight rules were unambiguous. Maintain course, remain in international airspace, and avoid escalation. But Moscow's interpretation was different. To Russian command, the presence of an American strategic bomber this close to Crimea wasn't routine reconnaissance. It was a provocation. By 9:47 hours, the Russian fighters had closed to within visual range. Through the cockpit windows, the crew spotted 2 angular silhouettes slicing through the morning haze. The Su-35s emerged like ghosts from the sea mist, their gray camouflage blending with the horizon. The lead fighter eased under the B-1's left wing, so close that the roar of its twin AL-41F engines reverberated through the Lancer's fuselage. The entire aircraft shuddered from the turbulence. "They're trying to provoke a roll," the co-pilot said, hands tight on the control column. "Stay steady," Major Voss replied. "They want footage, let them have it." The Su-35s weren't just shadowing. Their maneuvers crossed into unsafe territory. At 9:48 hours, one of the Russian fighters rolled inverted, flying upside down just 300 feet above the American bomber. The pilot's helmet-mounted display locked it directly onto the B-1, tracking its every movement. It was a scene reminiscent of Cold War standoffs, but with modern systems, modern weapons, and a far thinner margin for error. One gust of wind could have meant a collision between 180,000 pounds of American aircraft and 68,000 pounds of Russian jet. At 9:49 hours, NATO's Combined Air Operations Center in Torrejon, Spain, issued a Level 2 intercept alert. Within minutes, 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons from the 481 Fighter Squadron at Fătești Air Base in Romania were airborne, climbing east with full afterburners engaged. In parallel, intelligence teams at U.S. European Command in Stuttgart began correlating radar feeds from every available platform. The USS Roosevelt, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer patrolling the Black Sea, confirmed multiple Russian aircraft operating without flight plans. Their behavior suggested coordination, not coincidence. At 9:52 hours, one of the Su-35s fired a burst of flares, not as a countermeasure, but as intimidation. Magnesium streaks burned bright against the blue sky, cascading over the water below. Moments later, the lead Russian fighter executed a dangerous maneuver known as crossing the T, cutting across the B-1's nose at a distance of less than 100 feet. The wake turbulence hit instantly. "Wake turbulence! Hold trim!" Major Voss shouted. The Lancer pitched violently as alarms blared. For 6 seconds, the bomber lost 800 feet of altitude before the crew regained control. The stabilizers fought to counter the turbulent air, and then, just as suddenly, the Russians broke away, banking hard toward Crimea. At 9:57 hours, NATO controllers declared the intercept concluded. But inside the intelligence rooms, analysts knew the encounter had only begun. Signals intelligence soon revealed the Su-35s hadn't acted alone. 2 ground-based radar stations near Sevastopol and at least 4 Kroska-4 electronic warfare systems had gone active during the intercept. The pattern of low-frequency interference suggested deliberate jamming aimed at the B-1's satellite communication uplink. This wasn't spontaneous aggression, it was a controlled test of NATO's electronic resilience. By 10:04 hours, the Romanian F-16s had visual contact with the retreating Russian fighters, shadowing them from 10 nautical miles until they crossed back into Russian-controlled airspace. But post-mission analysis revealed something more troubling. Russian surveillance satellites had been tracking Viking 07's route since its departure from RAF Fairford, England, 6 hours earlier. Every altitude change, every course correction, had been mirrored on Russian radar across Crimea and southern Russia. The intercept had been premeditated. At 10:04 hours, U.S. European Command issued Situation Report 1. Russian Federation aircraft executed an unsafe intercept of a U.S. Air Force B-1B. No casualties. Aircraft returned to base, further analysis underway. But across NATO command centers, that report carried a deeper meaning. Moscow's decision to risk a near collision with an American bomber over international waters signaled something new, a willingness to test the limits of deterrence. Then came the second wave. At 10:20 hours, 2 additional radar contacts appeared, inbound from the east. The intercept was escalating. By 10:25 hours, 4 Su-35s were now in the air, spreading into a wide formation across 15 nautical miles. The intent was clear: box in the American bomber and measure NATO's reaction time. Encrypted Russian transmissions matched patterns seen during the 4th Air Army's electronic warfare exercises the previous year. Moments later, a Russian A-50U mainstay airborne early warning aircraft activated its radar array at full power. Its 360-degree dish swept the Black Sea, painting every NATO aircraft within 400 kilometers. The Russians were collecting data, mapping the electromagnetic signatures of Allied radar and communication systems. The B-1, now under escort from 4 F-16s, adjusted altitude to 31,000 feet and began a slow turn toward Romanian airspace. But at 10:29 hours, the Su-35s accelerated again. One climbed to 37,000 feet while another dropped to sea level, forming a pincer maneuver around the formation. Vector 076, distance 12 miles, came the AWACS warning. "Weapons cold. No one fires first," ordered the NATO air commander. Inside Viking 07, the tension was absolute. The Russian fighter passed underneath the bomber again, so close its vapor trail shimmered beneath the fuselage. Every frame was captured by the B-1's onboard cameras. Then, at 10:31 hours, a pulse disrupted the aircraft's electronics. Communications flickered, then went dark. "EW interference detected," reported the navigator. "Source unknown, likely ground-based jammer out of Crimea." The Krasuka-4 system had locked onto NATO frequencies. For 47 seconds, Viking 07 lost its secure data link. In that time, the bomber's situational awareness dropped to 0. Those 47 seconds would later be dissected line by line in NATO's 2025 Electronic Warfare Review as one of the clearest examples of coordinated Russian jamming against an active U.S. strategic aircraft. At 10:34 hours, reinforcements were ordered. A KC-135 Stratotanker on standby received diversion instructions, while 2 F-15EX Eagles from Łask Air Base, Poland, scrambled south toward the Black Sea. Their flight time, 12 minutes. At the same moment, NATO satellites tracked a Russian Il-20M reconnaissance aircraft departing Mozdok Air Base. It was likely assigned to record the entire incident. capturing radar reflections and radio traffic from both sides. By 10:37 hours, the skies over the western Black Sea were saturated with activity. Over 15 aircraft from 5 nations operating within proximity, separated by invisible borders and rigid discipline. Then the AWACS transmitted a coded message across all NATO frequencies. Command Alpha reports elevated readiness. U.S. European Command initiating DEFCON 3 watch posture for Black Sea region. DEFCON 3, heightened readiness. Europe hadn't seen that status since 2018, during a similar confrontation off Norway's coast. The stakes were rising fast. At 10:40 hours, tail number 57, Red, one of the Russian Su-35s, locked its radar onto a NATO F-16 for 6 full seconds. That was long enough to trigger the American pilot's threat receiver. Radar lock, bandit 2 o'clock, 8 miles, came the call. Break right, flare now. The F-16 banked sharply, deploying flares as defensive decoys. The Russian fighter peeled off but maintained distance, circling the formation deliberately. Analysts would later confirm this as a calculated tactic, a simulated engagement meant to probe NATO's engagement threshold. The Russians wanted to see how close they could get before provoking a response. On board the USS Roosevelt, Aegis radar operators switched systems into target illumination standby. They were seconds away from being able to launch SM-6 interceptors, but the order never came. U.S. Naval Command maintained fire discipline, aware that one missile could ignite a regional conflict. At 10:46 hours, NATO Command declared the situation critically unstable. All aircraft were ordered to disengage and expand separation. The Russian fighters regrouped near the Crimean coast, while the A-50U began turning north, signaling its mission complete. For a brief moment, the crisis seemed to de-escalate. But then, a new radar emission appeared. Bearing 045, unidentified source. It wasn't Russian, it was Turkish. Ankara had activated its early warning network, tracking both NATO and Russian flights to ensure the incident didn't spill into its own defense zone. The entire Black Sea theater was now alive with radar activity from 3 nations. At 11:02 hours, U.S. European Command authorized Operation Silent Edge, a classified rapid reaction air defense demonstration. 15 minutes later, a pair of F-35A Lightning II stealth fighters launched from Aviano Air Base in Italy. Their orders were clear: enter the Black Sea theater undetected and collect full-spectrum electronic data. By 11:18 hours, the F-35s were overhead, invisible to Russian radar, their passive sensors recording every frequency and emission from the Su-35s and the A-50U. The B-1 reached Romanian airspace at 11:21 hours, flanked by its escorts. Mission complete, no engagement, no casualties. But the implications were far greater. The Russians had shown a readiness to escalate near NATO borders, using electronic warfare and aggressive maneuvering as tools of deterrence. The Americans, in turn, demonstrated control and restraint under direct provocation. At 11:48 hours, the Su-35s returned to Belbek Air Base and the A-50U landed in southern Russia. The skies fell silent again, but the world had come dangerously close to an international incident hours later. Russia's defense ministry issued a short statement. Russian aircraft escorted a foreign bomber approaching national airspace. No violations occurred. The Pentagon's response was equally measured. U.S. Air Force aircraft conducted lawful operations over international waters. The interaction was unsafe and unprofessional. Behind the press releases, NATO's internal assessment was blunt. The Intercept had been deliberate, a coordinated test of Allied readiness, timed just days after Russia's hypersonic missile drills in the Arctic. It was a multi-theater stress test designed to stretch Western command networks thin. No missiles had been fired, no shots exchanged. But for nearly 90 minutes, the Black Sea had hovered on the edge of catastrophe. Operation Silent Edge remained unacknowledged publicly, its existence known only to those inside the command structure. Yet the data gathered that day, on radar frequencies, jamming techniques, and intercept timing, became one of NATO's most valuable intelligence troves of 2025. As the sun set over the water that evening, the Black Sea appeared calm. But the calm was deceptive. In the new era of strategic competition, Conflict begins long before the first weapon is fired. It begins with radar locks, jamming pulses, and intercepts that blur the line between intimidation and engagement. On November 3, 2025, a single US bomber and a pair of Russian fighters came within seconds of triggering a global crisis, and somewhere in the control rooms of Brussels and Moscow, planners were already preparing for the next encounter. Because in modern warfare, the first move belongs to whoever dares, and the last move belongs to whoever endures.